Well, first of all, thank you for joining and an interest in my talk. I'm going to talk about data strategy. Maybe before I start, I'll introduce myself and let's say my journey at Kiwi. So I joined Kiwi actually just lately, 3 months ago, in the middle of the pandemic. I am actually still working completely remotely, but I'm also looking forward to get back to the office and to get into touch with people, especially when you onboard and you're taking in a leadership position. Then not being in touch directly with people face to face sometimes feels a bit strange. I hope I managed quite well. Before I joined Kiwi, I was working at Flixbus and did basically the same that I do at Kiwi there. I was accountable for most of the activities around data. Today, I'm going to share with you our data strategy. I will be focusing on a couple of things there. But let's say before I start, I will present to you what I did over the last, let's say, 3 months. I'm not saying that this is the way you should do it. This is our way or my way and the way I used to work with the data people at Kiwi. So imagine you're in the midst of a pandemic, you join a company, the company is rather large. So Kiwi has more than 45 actually engineering teams or R&D teams, more than 450 people spread across the product engineering, and almost every team there is a data producer that you're interested in. So we have more than 65 data sources, internal as well as external data sources that power our analytical capabilities. And on top of those data sources, we have formed way above 100 reports. I think based on those reports and the metrics that we observe, they actually steer the company in a pretty data-driven way. We constantly monitor heaps of metrics. And I think JK actually said it in the beginning, and I have to confirm that when I joined, actually, travel industry is pretty complex. And if you look at our business model from the outside world, it might seem to be, let's say, simple. That's what also I assumed, even with a travel background. But when I joined, actually, I was wondering and was quite surprised, actually, on how many metrics we have across the value chain. Yeah, and then we have more than actually 50 data people with a lot of business analysts spread across the whole organization in different departments, and they are supported by business intelligence and data engineering teams. So my question was now, or my challenge was, how do I do that, right? How do I join actually a company, and how do I live up to the expectation that we actually generate much more value out of data than we used to do? So what did I do? How did I get going? Well, first of all, I started with actually learning about the status quo. I wanted to know about our strengths when it comes to data, about our weaknesses. I wanted to evaluate actually how mature we are in terms of data infrastructure and the organization. Based on the status and based on, let's say, my personal background, as well as working with senior leadership, I then actually set up ambitious yet realistic business goals. And I will get to them actually in a minute, are very important, because for us, data is not just, let's say, a thingy that has a certain purpose. Actually, at Kiwi, data serves our business and our product, and we need to be aligned on shared and mid and long-term goals to actually make sure that data really serves us well. So once we know where we are, and once we know where we want to be in terms of goals, we could then actually define strategies that help us to basically leverage or set the biggest levers up. And I today will actually focus on those strategies. For sure, strategies are nothing if you can't execute on them. So we also came up with a very specific plan, steps, and milestones actually that we want to achieve this year and then the upcoming years. And the last thing, and I think that's again pretty important, is whenever you introduce data initiatives and new initiatives, you actually need to prove their impact, and you need to demonstrate that, and you need to gain confidence actually in the value that they deliver. And that's why actually I think one of the most important steps that often people forget about is to actually measure their impact. And that's what we are going to do at Kiwi when it comes to data. So I've been talking about goals, about business goals. I think where data can actually contribute to, or how data can actually contribute to business success, are basically three main areas. So first of all, we can increase actually revenues, or we can generate revenues. So we have set actually revenue share targets for the years to come till 2024. We've also set goals for our impact on profitability, so especially on how we reduce actually cost. So those two areas can be pretty simple or easily measured. And then the third, and that's, let's say, more leap of faith, but still I think it's important to mention, is that using data we can actually mitigate business risks. And as I said, it's pretty damn hard to define, let's say, crisp metrics there. That's why I called actually mitigation of risk priceless. So now we have set up, let's say, our ambition level and realistic business goals. So now the question is, how do we get started? I mean, do you start working already on, let's say, moonshot projects? And do you go all in and promise impact from machine learning and even use the term AI? No, I don't think that we are going to do that. We are going to start, let's say, from the basics. We're going to start humble and then actually accelerate. And that's why we set actually our milestones in a way that we are going to start building actually the foundations. So we're going to focus actually on improved operational and tactical business decision makings and actually measure progress rather than outcome. Then once we have set those basics in place, then we will actually focus on delivering low effort data use cases where, for example, machine learning can be used to actually generate business values in terms of revenue or cost savings. And again, there we will definitely measure. And once we have then actually built up trust that data is really, really valuable at Kiwi, we will then focus on more strategic improvements where we will actually help to future-proof our business through especially increased decision-making speed. So now I've described a bit on what we want to achieve. The question is how, and when we talk about how, we want to talk about data use cases, and I just laid out a couple of them here so that you get an idea where actually data will be used and can help actually in our business model. So for example, we're going to work on competitive pricing because our mission is actually to always offer the best price on the market for any connection. Actually, then we are going to utilize, let's say, our market overview to provide attractive prices at each and every given point in time to our customers and increase our market share over time. As the market is pretty dynamic, especially during the pandemic, we've seen that actually travel behavior is adjusting quickly. How do we acquire customer? And there actually, again, data can help actually to improve how we actually spend our money on acquiring customer by actually continuously exploring what users are interested in, what they search, what destinations are trending right now or will be in demand, so we can actually then spend our marketing budget in the most efficient way. Also, when we look at our inventory, so we have actually a lot of unique inventory that you can't find anywhere on the internet or on any other booking site, and we need to learn actually how to present that unique inventory to our customers and to increase loyalty basically through our unique offerings. Then also, you probably heard about A/B testing. Actually, the travel industry, for example, booking.com is a company that really excels at A/B testing. We're also doing a lot of A/B testing, but we want to actually become much stronger and much more customer focused there. So we will use data actually to continuously sense what our customers enjoy about our digital product. And we want to continuously test features and do A, B, C, D, E testing, so that we continuously know what our customers likes and adjust to their needs. And then the next one is basically customer insights analytics. So we want to know actually how engaged our customers, what kind of behavior are they exposing, so that we make sure that we stay relevant and that we spot market trends and basically future-proof our business. And then the last of those use cases is about near-time business analytics. So we want to be able to sense actually trends and issues that we see out there and really react in, let's say, no time to, let's say, negative trends and fight them. Or if we see positive trends in the market, that we can actually even support them and reinforce them. Yeah, so those are just a couple of use cases that are in our pipeline. So now I said, well, there are goals. There are a couple of use cases that will help us to achieve actually our business goals. So now it's about strategy, and I subdivided basically strategy into 3 main pillars. So I will talk today a bit about our data architecture. I will talk how we're going to set up our organization, and about a couple of lean processes. So when we talk about data architecture, we actually want to create a reliable data ecosystem, and this is not, or that's easy said, but hardly done, or it's hard to do. What do we want to do there? We want to actually achieve that we move away from, let's say, data as a byproduct, so that data is being generated, to data product, so that data is actually being taken care of by our data producers as if they are, for example, maintaining an API. That will require us that we promote and actually expect data ownership across the organization, and we will support actually that data ownership from a data perspective then with self-service infrastructure. I will get into the details on the next slide. In terms of organization, we have decided to actually create something that we call hub and spoke organization. So we will have, let's say, central teams that bundle, let's say, know-how in terms of, for example, data science and data engineering, and put that at the fingertips actually of then more focused teams that are really close to our business needs, for example, to our finance department, for example, to our product guys and so on. And for sure, we don't want to build an organization up front, but want to be able to actually incrementally build it up according to prioritization, according to use cases, and according to business cases. So this is a requirement, and I'll show you how we're doing that. And then it's about finding, let's say, very lightweight processes. In terms of processes, there are 2 aspects that are important for data. First of all, it's about prioritization of data use cases, so that we can actually focus first our efforts and our scarce resources and focus on business impact. And the second point, and that's, I think, something I already said, we're going to measure everything so that we create actually utmost transparency and trust across the whole organization and across the business. Now, I will be actually talking a bit about the organizational aspect. Actually, sorry, yeah, I actually jumped 1 slide, sorry for that. So I wanted first to talk about data architecture. So when we're today looking at actually how our data architecture is set up, it's set up in a very classical way. So we have data producers on the one side. Those are our product engineering teams. They have transactional databases. And then basically we have data consumers. Data consumers are, for example, our business analysts, or we as the data part of the organization who are building reports, for example, we're also data consumers. And we're set up in a classical way where actually the data organization sits in between the data producers and the data consumers. So I would call ourselves today more data movers. So we're basically going to the transactional databases. We're interested in data and we extract it, move it into our analytical systems, and then basically provide access to downstream consumers, which actually creates a lot of indirection. So indirection means actually, let's say, a let's say, weak feeling of data ownership. So for example, what that means is if there is a data quality issue, then basically a data consumer sees that there's, for example, a weird value popping up in a column. And then what normally happens is that the data movers are informed, oh, there is a data problem, quality problem coming up, please fix it. But as we're only movers, we cannot fix those quality issues. And then we need to actually get into touch with the data producers, figure out where the data actually is coming from, and then convince them that they fix actually those quality issues. And that's what I call indirection. There are a lot of things that, let's say, can go wrong on the way actually we move data. And that's why we actually decided to get out of this business, to get out of that business of being data movers, but rather to enable actually direct communication between data producers and consumers. And we data people will actually focus on building a platform that will allow us to scale the whole organization, so that we're not building data pipelines and that we're not moving data from A to B, but actually that the data producers and data consumers will create an ecosystem that is reliable, and we, from a data perspective, will build the data platform to do so. In order to do so, we have actually defined a couple of principles, and I will only go into the three main ones. So first of all, our main principle is that we promote domain-oriented ownership. So that means actually a team or a squad owns a well-defined scope, and within a scope, within a feature scope, let's put it that way, there are data products contained, and those data products are being built by teams and are exposed actually to the whole organization. The other principle is data as a product, so not as a byproduct. So data producers really need to take care of their data assets, and they need to expose actually data just as they would do with an API. So we live up to that principle of you build it, you run it within Kiwi. When we talk about products, the same will actually apply to data. And the last item, principle, and I mentioned it already, is that we're going to build a data platform or a self-service data platform where basically you don't need to be an expert in, for example, data engineering today, build pipelines, but we will be providing actually tools so that everybody, every engineer, every data scientist, every business analyst will to a certain extent be able to actually build data products and data pipelines. And data products can be data sets, can be streams of data, can be reports, can be KPIs that will be monitored, and so on. Yeah, and that gives you, let's say, a bird's eye view on the target architecture or the change that we're going to introduce in terms of data architecture. Now, let me move over to the organization. I have been talking about hub and spoke teams. So hub teams, and we're talking now about the data part of the organization, and we call that data intelligence tribe. So we have, let's say, a central data organization, but that organization needs to be set up in a way that we're actually getting connected to actually our business and to the business departments around that, so that we are in tight collaboration with them. And how do we do that? Well, on the one side, we have hub teams. Hub teams are there and bundle basically, let's say, scarce resources, and you can think of them as centers of excellence. And they are working, let's say, in a very, let's say, focused way on data specific functions. So for example, we will have a data science services team that will help us to establish data use cases. We have a data platform and data tools team that will build actually this, what I call self-service data platform. And we have a business intelligence team that will actually help us to build data access models, so that we can actually build reusable models and don't need to rebuild the data access in every team. And then those hub teams are basically agnostic to our business, but for us it's actually pretty important that we get into touch and that we understand actually business context, and therefore we will actually create spoke teams, or we have created already spoke teams, and those spoke teams are basically mirroring our business units. So we will have spoke teams who will be, for example, working with our marketing department. So we have a marketing automation team in place. We have a team in place that will work on pricing and will be in touch with our pricing department and get actually requirements from that business department. Or we have a finance data warehouse team that is serving the needs of our finance department, so that we actually have proper reporting in place and potentially get even ready for a future upcoming IPO, where actually our financial reporting duties will be much tighter as they are today, as we are a private company. So over this, let's say, continuum of hub teams, of spoke teams, then we have our product engineering teams who are building mainly our customer facing applications. We have then actually business analytics teams in the different departments, and as I said, the spoke teams are mirroring those departments, and there is tight correlation actually happening, for example, between the marketing business analytics teams and the marketing automation team, and that provides basically the glue and the connection for us, so that we really stay in touch with our business and understand our business needs to the best extent possible. Yeah, then the third pillar of our data strategy are processes. So first of all, as I said, we are applying strict prioritization of data use cases and standardization efforts. As I mentioned, we're going to build up, let's say, a decentralized organization. So standardization will be actually a prime concern for us. But again, we do not introduce standardization just because we think it's good, but because there is a reason for that, and there needs to be a use case and a business case for that, and then we can actually prioritize standardization as well. And the second aspect of processes is that we want to measure basically any improvement that we do, so that we really create trust across the organization. I've been talking about data use cases quite a bit. I'm not going to go, let's say, into all the nitty-gritty details of a use case, but basically what you can think of a data use case is basically an automation or support of a business decision that leads to an action, and that action can be measured, or the impact of that action can be measured. That's basically a data use case, and it's often then connected with automated decision making, where, for example, machine learning can often help. But before actually we going to implement a data use case, we want to make sure that actually we're set up for success, and this is where we need to have clarity in place. So, for example, we need to know the objective and the business question that we're working on. We want to actually see that there's a link to a strategic business goal that we're pursuing over a couple of quarters or even years. We want to see a business case, or we want to know what is the expected value contribution of a use case and what will be the cost. How do we measure success? Who is actually the use case owner? So is that a colleague from product, or is it a colleague from marketing or our commercial team? We will need to know what are the required inputs in terms of data. What kind of data governance requirements are coming with a data use case? What kind of data analysis do we need to do once we have actually gathered all the input? What kind of skills do we need? What technology will we be using to work on a data use case? And ultimately, we want to come up with an implementation plan and potentially need for change management, because whenever we talk about automation, actually we talk about change, and that needs to be governed and managed actually appropriate. And for sure, we're all doing this to actually also then identify potential prerequisites and dependencies across use cases, so that we can come up actually with a meaningful prioritization and sequence that we're going to work on. How does a prioritization basically work? So again, we're starting with business challenge that we identify, where we say, well, data can actually be used. And again, it's mainly about automating decisions that we drive on all levels, operational, tactical, and as well as strategical ones. Then we're going into a value analysis. So we're looking at the business case. We understand actually the question at hand, and we were looking at the case. So what is actually the expected outcome, and how can we measure the value? And is there potentially strategic value? attached to it. Once we have understood that, we can then actually plan the implementation and the cost. So we can identify input and output data, technical capabilities, dependencies, and so on, and metrics of success, as I mentioned before. And then basically, based on the business case, the strategic value, the feasibility, the cost and the dependencies, we can come up then basically with a roadmap or a sequence of use cases that we want to get working on. All right, measure, I talked about measuring quite a bit. So what is it that we're actually going to measure? So we're going to measure the data use cases and the metrics of success, as I mentioned. We're going to measure actually our data products and the platform services, where we're going to monitor them continuously, and we ensure that actually they are healthy and that the adoption is actually kicking in, because you can build a lot of infrastructure services, but if no one is using them, then they're basically worthless, and that's something we want to prevent. So we're going to actually observe and measure and see whether we actually delivering the right services to the organization. And then also the last thing, even standards. So standards in terms of how do we want to, for example, enforce data quality. Standards are nothing without company-wide adoption and actually the way we want standards to be implemented. And that's also something we're going to measure to see actually whether we have the right standards in place, or whether we need to get rid of some because they're simply not adopted. Yeah, I just gave you a very, very fast overview over my last 3 months. It has been actually quite a ride. I hope I could give you some insights on how do you get started actually in a rather large and complex and grown business.